We started our Woodworking for Beginners series with all of these tools pretty much minus the plane for under $100 at Harbor Freight. The hand plane we just bought from Amazon Basics for $36. The problem is we have all these tools now and they're all over the place and they're kind of messy. So today we're going to build a toolbox to hold them all. So I've got all this pine left from the simple bookcase build that we did in December. And it's not a whole lot left here, but there's enough to build a toolbox for sure. It's all 3/4 inch stock select pine from Home Depot. This is all scrap wood. You could do this with just scrap wood in your garage. So the first board I have is about 5.5 inches wide. My toolbox, I want to be roughly 11 by 24. I feel like that's a good depth, enough of a depth to hold all the tools and wide enough that you can carry it comfortably. We're going to use all of our Harbor Freight tools to build this toolbox because you can't build a toolbox without tools. And we just bought our beginner tools, right? I didn't include in this kit a measuring tape yet. There's a couple more additions to tools that I need to add into the kit. So we are building in room for those. But in the meantime, I'm going to use the measuring tape that I have, or honestly, eyeball it. Say, hey, I want it about there. Square it off with your square, cut it square, and then take that one and transfer it to the other board, mark it. Now you've got your two sides. Then you can build everything else to that. Measuring out in the middle of the wood like this could be dangerous because you could be, a little cockeyed. So if you want exact results, get as close to the edge as you can. So we're going to measure out to be 11 and a half. I'm going to put my knife in there and make a little nick. From there, I'm going to put my knife blade until I can hear it. Hear that? Right there. I can hear it fall into that mark. I'm going to take my square and bring it up to where it just touches the blade. Then I'm going to come down and I'm going to gently pull a line, kind of at a little bit of an inward angle. I'm going to pull a line all the way down. So if you can see right here, that's the line we cut. We're going to cut this side of that line, but this is our knife wall now. We're going to use a knife wall most of the time. You can use a pencil, but pencils are like the tip of a pencil here is much wider than the thickness of that blade, right? Plus it's also going to help sever the fibers so that when you go to saw it, you don't get too much tear out. All right, with our board secured in the vise, I want to make sure when I cut that I'm cutting down this line, that I'm cutting square to this face, right? So what we can do is take our knife, put it in that knife wall that we just created and pull our square up to, again, touching that blade, and then pull our knife across. We're going to take our 3/4 inch chisel and just come maybe about 1/8 of an inch back from our cut. We're going to go kind of shallow and just wiggle until you feel that pop. And now we can take our thumb and just brush that aside. We're cutting across the grain. If we were cutting with the grain, like you see the direction the grain's going, that's a rip cut. When we're cutting across the grain, it's called a cross cut. So you see right here, this side with the real big teeth is a rip saw. It's made for cutting with the grain. The other side here, a lot smaller teeth, this is a cross cut saw. It'll give you a much finer cut as you're cutting across the grain. So this is the side that we want to use. That little notch that we cut with the chisel, we're going to put our saw blade right into that. Then I'm going to take my other hand and put it on the board here and take my thumb and kind of cut it in and use the knuckle as kind of a rest to slide the saw back and forth on. And what I'm doing before I pull, I can see the reflection of this board in the blade here if I kind of look over to the side a little bit. So you can kind of use that to determine if you're straight across or not. But if I turn it this way, you can see the reflection of the board and it almost looks like the board is cutting off to the side. It's not a straight continuous board. So what I want to do, a trick, is just turn that blade until the board looks like it's continuing straight through the blade and off to the other side. So what we want to do is give the saw blade as many teeth as possible on this board as we're cutting. So we're going to go on an angle. What that's going to do is we'll have this top line to reference, and we'll have this cut line here to reference. We're going to keep that angle all the way down, all the way through our cut. So once you've gotten that first kind of cut established, you don't have to use your knuckle anymore. You can kind of pull back. At this point now, we're just going to keep pulling gently. Let the saw do its work. If you feel a lot of vibration like that, you can try lowering the board down in the bench. So in the cut, my left foot is straight forward. My right foot is turned 90 degrees and bracing the back. My arm is, I've got my other hand holding the board just for stability, and my arm is not twisting, it's not pulling the blade, it's just letting it do its thing. Slowly pull it down. You'll notice when you start getting down towards the end of your cut, you're gonna start hitting your bench on the back side. So you can do a couple of things. You can just start cutting down like that, or you can raise the wood up if you can in your vise a little bit more.
Thanks, Captain Obvious.
Now, when you get down to the bottom, your saw blade hits the bottom of the board. Don't keep just cranking into it. This is the time to listen, use your ears. You'll start to hear the tone of the saw cut change. It'll start getting lighter. When you get to that point, that's your clue to slow down, feather cut, real light, slow, smooth cuts. Take your other hand, hold the side of the cutoff to support it. Hear that? And pull it. And that'll give you a nice, clean cut.
Practically perfect in every way.
Here's our board in the vise. We're a little bit fat on this side, so I'm going to flip the board around, bring it down maybe an inch, inch and a half above the surface of the vise here. Then I'm going to slowly, very slowly, just progress the blade forward till it just starts engaging. So what I want to do now is plane across. However, if your blade comes through and hits this side, it's going to blow that out and you're going to get tear out. So when you're planing end grain, you always want to come in from the sides to like about the middle. So you can give a little more blade if you need to. And you can see here the difference. So this is the wood that we planed, and this is off the saw. It's going to smooth it out a lot more. So now I'm going to flip it around in the vise, or you can come at it from the other way if you want. All right, and with that, we have our first piece, 11.5 inches long, 3/4 inches thick, 5.5, I believe, inches tall. So we need one more of these and two more at 24 inches long. I'm going to cut that off camera, same process as you just did. Come back when we've got those pieces together.
A few moments later.
Two 24s, two 11.5s. Now we have to join these together to make a box, right? So what I could do, bang it all up on the bench. So what I could do is just put these together and you could pre-drill some holes and screw these together and you'd be good to go. But that's not what we're about. We're trying to learn beginning woodworking. However, we don't want to just screw two pieces of wood together and call it a day. That's maybe too beginner. Now, I'm not saying we're going to dovetail these two corners together. That's too advanced, but we could find some joinery that we can join these two together with without having to use screws and hardware. So what we can do is what's called a box joint. Now, cutting a box joint, like two little rectangles on both boards, and the two kind of go together like fingers, right? And that makes a really strong, solid joint. However, we're cutting these by hand, and doing that and chisel, all that chisel work and stuff is going to be kind of tough for a beginner. So what I'm suggesting we're going to do is one singular kind of a box joint, open mortise and tenon joint, whatever you want to call it. What we're going to do is measure over from the edge 3/4 of an inch. So I'm just going to take my square ruler here, a little room here, mark on an inch mark, and then come over 3/4 of an inch. 3/4 of an inch because that's the thickness of our board. Put my square up to it and pull a reference line. So now I'm going to transfer it to the vise, and I want to bring those lines that we just cut over to the front. I'm going to put our knife in the little nick mark there, or the cut mark, and transfer those over. Now I'm going to bring it around to this side. So if I line that up, hopefully yours lines up from side knife mark to knife mark. I'm going to pull a line there. So what if we come over 1 inch on each side? I think that's an easy measurement to kind of go off of. So put my knife in the mark, bring it up, pull a line. What I'm going to do is definitely stay on this side of the line, right? Use my thumb like the anchor point like we did before, and just do a couple straight pulls like that. That's going to get us kind of started where we want to be, right? Then I'm going to flip over to my rip saw blade. Now I've got a nice groove that saw is going to register in. And now I can saw down to my line. So I'm going at this straight this time, and I'm trying to stay within my line over here as close as I can to it without cutting into it. So I'm getting down to my line now, checking on both sides, we're looking pretty good. Flip it around, we're going to cut the other one. And then flip around and we're going to cut this side off. With my thumb. And then once I get it registered, coming down to just about my line, and I'm going to straighten up and come down to just about that and pops that right off. Flip it around, cut the other side. Now, depending on how good you are at sawing, you're probably going to have some weirdness here where the saw is not cut exactly straight or whatever. Keep it in your vise. You could probably use the 1 inch here just to make it a full pass. And we're going to make sure that we're going to our line. We're a little fat on this side, so we're just gonna press into that until we get down to our line. And these chisels are dull, but they'll cut. So now right there, we're looking pretty good. Now flip it around, same thing, but we're gonna come at it from the end grain side now. But we're basically just gonna press down, use your body weight, lean into it a little, and make sure you get right down to your line. We've got it on one side. Now we just need to do it, flip it over, do it on the other side. We're gonna have to do this same step on all 4 sides of our short pieces. So I'll be back when we've got that done.
A few moments later.
All right, we've got both of our pieces cut now for our end pieces. They don't have to be the same size. If you're cut a little weird and you need to square this side out, this one's 3.5 inches across and this one's maybe 3 and 3.25 or something. It might look a little weird when you're finished, but it will still work just as good. I've got our front board here in the vise, and I put our hand plane down on its side and kind of using that as a brace for the side piece. So I'm lining up these edges against the back of here. I'm lining up this front piece against that. This, if it sticks out a little bit, that's okay. We can plane that down. The main goal is to get this flush against the inside of that board. And then press down on it, put a little pressure on it, then take your marking knife, come in here and score that. And now we need to get our 3/4 inch distance. I can lay the board down on its side and take the mating piece, line it up, make sure it's flush with the edge, mark my line. And that gives us where we want to cut. I'm going to cut on the inside of our line. We can go a little fat with it, right? We can't add more wood on, so if we take too much off and then the joint fits sloppily in there, that's not going to be good, right? So what we can do is just go to our line and then just move our saw just a little bit over. and then cut square and down all the way to our line. Nice. All right, now we're going to use our coping saw. The coping saw we're going to use to chop or cut out most of this waste, and we're going to come back with the chisel to kind of clean it up. So you can go in that you just cut, and the coping saw is cool because you can make gradual curves and stuff. So we're just going to start at the top and start angling in, and we're going to cut out that waste. All right, so offering it up to the piece, obviously we cut it fat, so it's not going to go in there right away. But I'm just kind of taking a look at my lines here, seeing where I need to chop down and making sure everything's still kind of lining up. You can see the depth we're almost down to. So the first thing I want to do is kind of clean up these sides a little bit. But essentially, pare those down. And test fit again. So this may be a bit time consuming, but it's mainly just keep offering it up to it, seeing if it fits, seeing where you need to trim. Ooh, we are almost there. All right, we are looking really good there. We've got a good fit. So now we need to take care of the depth here. So you want to make sure that the boards that you're cutting are matched to one another. These are not going to be too interchangeable, especially like I said, if you've got some differences in length. So the best way to do that is just to label these A to A. Now these two will be a pair all the time. And as you assemble them and glue them up later, we're going to make sure that A matches A, B matches B. That way you've got them and you don't get them confused. I want to chop out all this waste. So I'm not going to go right on our line and just start bashing it in, because what that'll do is this bevel will kind of press into this wood and it'll start pushing back on here and cause a lot of indentations. You're not going to get that nice clean fit. So what I'm going to do is come down here where it's thinner. I'm going to move maybe a 1/16 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch off of our line and chop this off. I'm not going all the way through, I'm going about halfway. I'm going to switch over to my 1-inch chisel and go right on my mark. There's less than a 1/16 of an inch, maybe a 32nd left there. So I'm going to go right on my mark and chop this down with a wider chisel. And then just work your way across that line, making sure that your back of your chisel is parallel with the board. All right, so we've got our A side out. Our A side of the side piece. I'll wiggle it in a little bit and then just tap it home. Now be cautious. If you're hammering this in and you're really having to crank on it, you could split this wood. We've only got 1 inch of wood there. You could put a crack right down the middle. Too tight? Tight is good. You want it to be snug so that there's room for some glue to work in there and you want a nice snug fit. However, you don't want it so tight that you're having to just smash it in and put dings in your wood and stuff and risk splitting this. So if it's too tight, shave some more off the sides. For our case, we are looking pretty good. Our first box joint done. This is going to be the first corner of our case. I'm going to do this same process now on the other 3. And we're going to come back when we have kind of a box.
A few moments later.
Our box outer shell is done. All of our joints are done. We're looking pretty good. We've got occasional gaps here and there, but most of that will close up with clamping and glue. I think what we're going to do is glue this up, get it in clamps right now, and then we're going to clamp up a bottom for this as well. We've got 3 pieces we're going to glue together to make a big enough of a panel to make a bottom. And then if we have time, we'll clamp up the boards for the top so we can come back and get those attached. Depending on how many clamps you have, you may have to do this in sections. If you only have 1 F clamp, you may have to do this in kind of sections. I would suggest at least having two. We've got one in our kit, but you know, the point was to kind of show you can get a clamp. I would get at least 2 or 3 of these, if not 4 would be great. They're fairly cheap and inexpensive, so getting 4 would be ideal. That way you can kind of clamp these up all the way around. They're not going to go lengthwise, they're not long enough. Harbor Freight does sell longer clamps if you want that. I've got other videos on those bar clamps and stuff. That's what I'm going to use to clamp this up. Now, if you don't have clamps, you got to get kind of creative with it. You can glue it up, stand it up on end, and put like heavy weights on this or something. If you have something real heavy, bricks, whatever you can do to kind of see if you can close these up and put some weight on it while that glue cures up. You could put this up against a wall somewhere where you have your bench, and then screw a board to your bench right here. Screw a board to your bench, and you can get a wedge of wood and hammer that in there, and as that wedge goes in there, it'll put pressure on the box and have enough force to glue it. You don't have to glue this all up at once. That's kind of the joy of building this without like dovetails and stuff. You could glue one side up first and then come back and put the other side on and glue that up as well. So let's get this glued up. All right, that's it for today. We've got our box in clamps. It's glued up. We've got a square rectangle. Well, we've got a square rectangle. So we have a rectangle that is going to be the outer walls of our toolbox. We've got 2 panels clamped up and glued up that will be the top and the bottom. In the next episode, we're going to put the top and the bottom on the box. We're going to split the box. We're going to put hinges on hardware, handles, everything to hold it. And then we're going to get into tool organization inside of the box. So stay tuned for those. Subscribe down below if you haven't yet so you don't miss those videos. Give me a thumbs up on this video. Comment down below. Let me know what you think of this project. Is this a good beginner project or not? I think it is. I will see you on the next one.
Message.